The gentleman said that defending Taiwan is defending the United States, which I certainly agree with. And so that there shouldn't be a separation between Democrats and Republicans in Washington on this issue. Congressman, your comments.
I agree. I know why, and I'm not going to get into a political speech here, but I know why Joe Biden is different as it relates to China. But you would think these independent, elected, Democratic congressmen and women would see the threat that China is. I mean, for your head of your intelligence in December, this was this past December, this wasn't 10 years ago, to say that our number one national security threat is China, and through the things you just heard talked about, if Taiwan is taken out, strategically that becomes very problematic for the entire region. And that then becomes a threat to the United States, not just economically, but militarily. So I agree with you 100%. I question constantly why my counterparts that are Democrats in Congress aren't taking a tough stand to China. I ask the question constantly. I haven't gotten a good response because the facts are very, very evident. And if you talk to the allies in the region, which we're talking to one of them now from Japan, and hearing your story from Taiwan, it's very evident that we have an issue from a national security perspective that needs to be addressed at the federal level and in Congress. And I hope and pray that there's more members on the Democratic side that will start becoming bold about it, because if Congress were to take a stand, Democrats and Republicans would take a stand against China. It'd be very hard for the administration to go against that, because you have the House of Representatives taking a bipartisan stand from a national security perspective, and we fund the budget. We fund the military. So yes, he's the commander-in-chief, but guess what? The House decides the purse strings and decides where the allocation of resources are. So I don't know how to answer that question because I can't speak for the Democrats, but I can tell you that I've talked many times to them, and they have not given me a reason why they are failing to stand up against China.
So, ma'am, this point about Taiwan, really important. Maybe you should be the Secretary of State. Yes. The question is Hong Kong. It's on her bucket list to go. I think he probably shouldn't go until there is a democracy there, because it's getting really dangerous. Cleo?
Go to Taiwan. Go build up some. And this issue about Taiwan, just to go back to it very quickly, not only is Taiwan about the U.S., it's about, everybody in the region knows it's about the whole region. The Indians know, for example, that China's going to hit out somewhere. So is it going to be the South China Sea, the East China Sea, Taiwan, or the Himalayas? Right? They're pushing on all of those doors at once. They've got this comprehensive national power construct, which is in all of their think tanks. The goal is very overt, to be the #1 country in terms of comprehensive national power. That includes everything, including intellectual property, economics, military, all that stuff. They're going to push until they get there. So if Taiwan is too hard to hit, they'll go to the Himalayas. If they get Taiwan, once that whole rim is weakened, then they'll hit the Himalayas. So we know that this is all very interlinked. And just a quick plug for that report, because the guy who wrote it is here, Colonel Grant Newsham. He's also at CPAC. If you're interested in Taiwan, it's a very good report, because it just says this is the domino effect. We are back to a Cold War domino effect. And one just quick thing about Japan is, unfortunately, because we did some research there, the Japanese military has not gamed an attack on Taiwan. They don't know what they would be called to do in conjunction with the US if there was an attack on Taiwan. So we need to have these discussions much more open and much more practical in order to be in a position to try to push back on China.
Jay, in August 2019, you went with the American Conservative Union to Hong Kong. If you could just tell us your impressions.
はい、ちょうど2年前ですよね。ゴードンとそれからマット・シャラップと私ともう荒れ狂う香港に行きました。で、もう何とかして独立のために、民主化のために立ち上がろうとしている人たちを助けなければいけないという、もうみんな共通の思いをしたわけですよ。我々も爆破の危機にもあって命からがら逃げ出したぐらい、でももっとあの時よりも香港はひどくなっている。で、特に今気をつけなければいけないのは、今年は中国共産党の100周年記念なんですよ。 でこの年っていうのはこういった節目節目の年で必ず彼らは何かをやってきますので、我々今年についてはよく注目しておかなければいけないし、香港を守るという観点においては非常に今大きな危機が来ているというふうに私は思います。非常な危機を感じています。
Yes, I have a strong sense of crisis. 2 years ago, Gordon, Lydia, Matt Schrapp, Dan Schneider, and we all went to Hong Kong together and to try to help the Hongkongese and the young people to try to be independent and win the democracy back. And we were warned, we were almost, the place that we visited was firebombed twice. So it was very dangerous for us, but we got out from there safely. But now the situation is worse than the time. And as we know, the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, is going to have a 100-year anniversary this year. And China is known to do something for this kind of some marking point. So this year they might take some kind of action. So we have to expect and ready for it. So yes, Hong Kong is in a very critical time. So we really need to be ready for it.
Congressman, quickly, your colleagues, both sides of the aisle, what do they think about Hong Kong?
Again, you don't hear much, and I don't understand why. You don't hear much from the Democrats on Hong Kong. When President Trump was in office, you heard their administration take a very aggressive stance to the things that were going on there. You've seen their administration when there has been some type of militarization from the Chinese Communist Party in the area outside of Taiwan. You've seen us respond militarily to show they are an ally in the area and we're here. There was a whole bunch of exercises by our military. That's not happening, and it won't happen under the Biden administration. And you just don't hear the Democrats talking about it. Republicans have great concerns about it. That's why President Trump did such a great job from a military perspective, from a national security perspective, because he understood all of this. And if he didn't understand it, he listened to people that were smart on it, and he then agreed, understanding that this is a significant issue in the region, and you have to act aggressively to ensure the safety and security of the region.
We're really running out of time. There's a woman in the back in orange. So, Congress. Congressman, I didn't hear all that, so could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so I'll try to summarize that. Chinese paid or Chinese Communist Party folks who have lifetime tenure at universities in the state of Florida, how do I feel about that? I don't think that's right at all. I served in the state legislature, and those were things that we were trying to address as a Republican-led legislature. I have had conversations, and I don't want to put him on the spot because he's not. I don't know if he's here or not, but I have had conversations with who is now Speaker Sprawls, because that's 100% a state issue. That's 100% an issue that the state legislature could deal with, and State Representative Sprawls, who's the Speaker, has talked about some of those issues. So I would not be surprised if you see the legislature who goes into their session here in Florida in March address some of those concerns. I'm happy to relay some of those concerns. That's 100% a state, yeah. which is a huge problem. And I actually think that this is going to be an issue that is on his radar that he's going to look to address. And if my bill that I kind of discussed earlier were to pass, our intelligence agencies would know who every one of those people are, because they would be required to report that the university would be required to report that information, that these individuals are tenured professors at whatever university they are and are getting funding from the Chinese Communist Party.
So if
My husband, or my father, at a Chinese university in Beijing, and he was also president of Evergreen State College. So it's very important because someone like me knows the threat China really is.
So Greg, if I could just move on, because we really almost short of. We waited so long to start this session. I actually made a new friend. Jeff, just a 1-second question.
Yeah, could you elaborate on South Korea and the problems with the recent election and how they may fall?
Cleo, you have 20 seconds to talk about South Korea and the April 15th election.
So the bottom line of that is that it was a very interesting case of Chinese Communist Party infiltration, it looks like, into an electoral system in multiple what now might look like very familiar ways, with the goal of getting a compliant parliament in place, with the ultimate goal of getting the U.S. off the peninsula. It's extremely problematic, and it's definitely worth looking into.
We are out of time. I'm just going to ask the audience, show of hands quickly. In 1 year at CPAC 2022, are we going to be safer or less safe with regard to China? Those who think we're going to be safer. Those who think we're going to be less safe. Okay, I'm going to go through the panel very, very quickly. 10-second answers. Congressman, go. Are we going to be safer or less safe 1 year from now with regard to China?
We're going to be less safe, and that's because we have a Biden administration, and I don't have to go through the history of the connections of the family to being paid by the Chinese Communist Party. They've been pro-China. They're going to completely undo all of the great things that the Trump administration has done.
Jay Aiba, are we going to be safer or less safe?
もう危険になります。より危険になります。それは確実です。
More dangerous for sure. We're going to be in a more dangerous situation for sure.
Okay, Cleo, we started with you. We're going to end with you. 10 seconds.
It's not looking good. And I think that the big problem is we're funding it. Through the stock market, through investments in companies that have links to Chinese corporations, through letting them into our universities, we are creating and feeding the attack on the free world. So it's an insanity that is sort of incomprehensible once you start to look at it, and the mechanisms for dealing with it within the US have been weakened. Within countries like Japan and India and Australia, they're standing up, they need our help, but it does not look good.
What can we do?
I'd love to answer that question, but they'd never let me moderate again. So I want to tell you
Start to cut
all,
off their funding.
I want to tell you all, thank you so much. You've got so much common sense, and please give these guys a round of applause.